what is going on, you guys? It's your boy Arti, Executive Director of Film and Art, and today I'm joined by a special guest. Appreciate you for giving us your time today. That is Devin Jackson, writer for the Philly Inquirer. Did I say it right? Philly Inquirer?
Yeah,
Yeah,
you said, yeah, you did.
yeah. But Devin, how you doing today, brother?
Yeah, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on, Artie. We've been kind of going back and forth for a little bit here, but excited to, talk Senior Bowl, talk NFL draft prospects. I always tell people it's the best time of year. You can't really, there's quite no coverage of a specific event quite like the NFL draft and all the hype that goes around it, everyone wanting to join in, having their own opinion. So, I think this is the best time of year. Everyone is kind of on the same page in terms of turning the page. I know the Super Bowl is on Sunday, but the NFL draft is going to take center stage as soon as that game is over.
Absolutely, absolutely. Speaking of, the Senior Bowl, what was your experience in Mobile like? Did you get to enjoy any of the food or festivities outside of practice? Like, what was just the energy and the atmosphere down there in Mobile for the 2024 Senior Bowl?
Yeah, it was always great. It's always a busy time being in Mobile. The Senior Bowl is one of the biggest draws during the draft season. Everyone wants to get down there, see these guys up close and personal. It's really the first. And there's several other All Star games happening leading up to that week, and a couple other. But a lot of NFL personnel are there. Most teams are represented. But it's great energy. You get to see a lot of people that cover the NFL draft year round, or team or content creators from various teams, just various content creators, writers, journalists, video journalists. I mean, you really get all of them down in Mobile, and it's always a great time. You get to see people that maybe you look up to, maybe whose work that you respect. People are big in this journalism industry, all down there conversating, watching practices. And for the first time, really, I won't say you see a level playing field, but you're in the same spaces as these well respected people that everyone else follows. So getting to do that every year is always a pleasure. You always get to see so many great people out there, make so many great memories as well. I think the underrated part of the Senior Bowl is not necessarily just the practices and getting to talk to prospects, but the ability to network with people, to go out to dinner or have a drink with a few other people. There's so many possibilities throughout the week that can be had, and if you play your cards right, you can have a good time. So to kind of answer your question in terms of food and whatnot, had a some good barbecue food down in Mobile. I had a good spot there. Seafood is always great down there. There's a oyster house, Winsel's
Hmm.
downtown. That's a big spot as well. That's great. So you're always going to have great food options there. Mardi Gras was getting ready to start, so they're starting to have some parades throughout the week. So it's really kind of a busy time for the city. You have the Senior Bowl, you have Mardi Gras starting up in Mobile. Um, really, no better place to be to kind of catch the vibes of kind of football, but in addition, the vibes of a city as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, my grandmother is actually from Montgomery, Alabama, so I've never like
Mhm.
gone pretty much south of that down to Mobile, but definitely, could understand, the love for the barbecue and the love for the seafood, especially with Mobile being a port city as well. The seafood is definitely hitting down there. So, yeah,
Yeah, the
appreciate you sharing.
oysters. Yeah, for sure. The oysters are amazing down there. Two couple years
Oof.
in a row that I've had the oysters, and they haven't disappointed. So I would definitely recommend that for those who like seafood, don't have a shellfish allergy. Winsel's is the place to go if you want to get your seafood fix.
There you go. You guys got free game today on where to eat down in Mobile. As far as scouting goes, when did you get into the realm of scouting? And if you have one, what would you say is your biggest, you know, cap feather in your draft hat, your biggest hit as far as, you being right on a prospect? What prospect are you most proud of that you've evaluated so far in your scouting journey?
Yeah, so I'll start with getting into scouting. So it was really something that came about. Probably it's about 5 years ago now, and I had just it was right around the time I was trying to get kind of a full time job in the journalism industry. I had worked some freelance opportunities in 2018, and they just weren't long term jobs. So kind of in the meantime, I started to uh, dive into and really start watching like the spring football league. So it was the AAF that had just started up. I ended up covering a game for the Birmingham Iron. Actually, they were playing, I believe, the Atlanta Legends. So that I kind of started getting into that realm of football, like doing that in my free time, because I was working at the time in a warehouse, FedEx warehouse, just to make ends meet.
Hmm.
So I started getting into that, and then I realized like my entire life I've been watching the NFL draft. Like every year, whether or not I knew every single prospect. I was watching it, and it was always interested in me. So there was an opportunity that came along that I could start to kind of make my headway there, and I will be covering just Big Ten uh, NFL draft prospects. So I got in the end of 2019, the 2019 class. Kind of did top 25 big board, watch about 40 guys total. And then from there, I really started to dive in. So in that fall of 2019 is when I really got into it. So guys like Marco Parsons, Cesar Ruiz, um, I'm trying to think of some other names. Nico Collins was playing for Michigan at the time. Um, Michael Penix was in Indiana, so it was a
Hmm.
it was a different world at that time. But I was watching these guys every week, giving my own analysis of them, what they did. Uh, you know, Jeff Okuda was a big one. That was the number 3 pick in the 2020 draft. Chase Young. So I picked a good year to get into scouting, and then the Big Ten specifically. And then like towards 2020 or towards the end of the 2020 classes when I started looking at the entire class as a whole. I moved to a different website, and I was able to really just give my own draft take. So that's kind of really how I got into it. I was always interested in college football, love watching college football, watched so many games, and I knew a lot of the players already, but I kind of looked at a different lens in getting to scouting. Using some of my playing career experience and learning coverages and learning different run schemes. I played tight end at a Division II college, Lindenwood University, for
Okay,
four
that's what's
years.
up.
So I use that knowledge that I got there and experience that I got there to really get into scouting. So from there, I've been following it closely and more closely every year. I would say 2021 is probably the year that I really started to um, get recognized a little bit in the scouting industry or just the NFL draft sphere. People started to follow me a lot more and my takes a lot more. And kind of from there, I tried to provide as much robust coverage as I can. Now, in terms of like the biggest draft hit or feather in the cap, I would say probably Deron Bland from the
Oh
Cowboys defensive back.
wow.
So I
Okay.
uh, during that year I watched closely Mountain West prospects, and late that fall I started noticing Deron Bland at Fresno State, and I was like, yo, this guy is really good. So by the time January or February rolled around, that's when I really started tweeting about him and say, hey, this guy's going to be really good. I think he's going to really carve out a role. I thought he could maybe play safety, he could play corner, really anything that you can do, anything that he could do. I ended up giving him a late third round grade, and from there, he's had an awesome season this year, filling in for Trayvon Diggs. So I would say that probably is the guy right now. I would say is kind of the feather in the cap guy. I was also early on Cesar Ruiz being a potential first rounder. I tweeted about him like October of the 2020 draft. Uh, before people really started noticing him. And I would say he's probably a close second, even though he hasn't really turned out to be a top interior offensive lineman. He did end up going first round. So I was a little early on the wave, but I would say Deron Bland is probably the one I'll stick to.
That's very interesting to me personally. One, because I started scouting in 2021 season as well. Well, I technically started in 2020 like you, so kind of like a year behind. But started scouting in 2020, did about 40 to 50 players. And then 2021, because I am a Cowboys fan. After Dak Prescott broke his ankle, I was not finna sit around, not finna wait for the media pundits to tell me who we should draft. I was gonna figure it out for myself. And then it just led to me not only scouting for the Cowboys, we're just scouting for the league at large. So thank you again for sharing that story. And quickly on Deron Bland, that's a very interesting feather because those Mountain West guys, it's sometimes it's hard to it's I mean it's I'm sorry, it's easy to forget about them, because everybody praises at adamantly so the SEC, corners, some of the Big Ten corners, some of the ACC corners, but those kids in the Mountain West, man, they can play. And Deron Bland's tape was fantastic. I remember watching it in 2022 as well. So yeah, shout out to you for that because yeah, that was definitely a diamond in the rough and a very important pick for the Cowboys this year because without Deron Bland, they probably don't have the regular season success that they had.
Yeah,
So
I'll tell you
kudos to
what, the
you on that one.
Cowboys routinely, I feel like every time I look at their draft, it's like a lot of guys that I like. They end up being on their board, like Simi Fahoko this year from, or Vimy Fahoko from San Jose State was a guy that I like from the Mountain West. So they scout really well, especially on that West Coast and in the Mountain West Conference. They do a great job of finding those guys, identifying them, and picking ones that can be contributors. I think that's the most important thing. Marquise Bell was another guy that I really liked throughout the draft process at Florida A&M, and I thought he should have been an easy early day three pick. And obviously him playing linebacker, I think he's a bit out of a position. He should probably still be playing safety, but he's so good that he can fill those holes and really do a nice job. So he was another guy that I really liked throughout the process that the Cowboys ended up, picking up as a UDFA, and he's become a main contributor for them.
Yeah. We also picked up one of his teammates, Isaiah Land, the edge rusher from Florida A&M. But what happened was we let him go through waivers, and I believe Cleveland signed him immediately after that. So we
Gotcha.
could have had another, impact player from that university. Um, but moving on here, um, what position, in your opinion, as a unit, stood out the most to you at the Senior Bowl? This class is full of, offensive linemen and defensive lineman talent, right? This class is full of wide receivers. But what position to you at the Senior Bowl really stood out and really exemplified why it's one of the deepest in the class?
Yeah, it had to be offensive lineman. I was the most excited about that group coming into the week, and I think they proved every bit of it. Jackson Powers Johnson, the Oregon center, he played fantastic, both at guard and center, which wasn't a surprise. I think everyone that uh, watched his tape and understood what he did well, we knew it would translate, and he even did it with a nagging hamstring injury as well, which makes it even more impressive. Pretty much through 1.5, almost 2 days practice before he had to bow out because of the injury kind of flaring up again. But that was no surprise in terms of what he would do. But in a drill that slanted for the defense to win, the offensive linemen across the board, I mean, most of them had multiple wins each day. And maybe you say that's a negative to the defensive line, the edge rushers, but I think that goes to show how much more polished and skilled this offensive line is, or offensive linemen are in this year's class compared to other ones. I think you have multiple guys that were in Mobile that could be first round picks. Talisa Fuaga had a really good week. Obviously, I mentioned Jackson Powers Johnson. Tyler Guyton continued to show his flashes and what he can do with his athleticism. And then the day two class is probably the most robust class of any position group, maybe rivaling receiver in terms of how much talent they have, how much future starters they have. People are players like Dominic Puny from Kansas who played both guard and tackle at Kansas in his career. He did he played virtually all five spots and did it at a high level, which was impressive for a guy that really didn't have much center experience. He also had some center snaps and did pretty well in those positions. Christian Haynes from UConn is another guy that really like coming into. I thought he was going to be like a late day two pick. He certainly solidified himself on day two for sure. And I think he maybe goes early third round, late second round. But he showed not only his ability to be a powerful run blocker, but uh, hold up in his anchor as a pass protector. So just to name a few, those are some really, really impressive guys from the week. Kingsley Suamataya from BYU showed some nice flashes. I think he still needs to round out his game, but the skill set certainly says he could be a potential first rounder as well. So I think the group as a whole, I mean, you really had probably seven, eight, nine guys there at the Senior Bowl that could be top 100 picks, come April. So I think no other position could really, say that down at the Senior Bowl. Receiver, I would say, is the only one that could rival it, but the talent at the offensive line position was on full display at the Senior Bowl, and I think it continues to show that if you need an offensive lineman this year, you can get them not only early on day one, but on day two, and possibly even early day three, with just how much depth it has and how much potential it has as well. Guys that can play multiple spots, guys that can play either side of the line. If you need it, I would suggest you get an offensive lineman and get the one that you want within the first 2-3 rounds.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more on that. I think Talise Fuaga, the most telling rep of the offensive line as a unit being the most impressive was Talise Fuaga. I believe on his first rep against Latu Latu day one at practice, just simply plastered him into the dirt. Like Liatu Latu, for context purposes, like is one of not only the most technical sound rushers, but one of the most like toolbox ready pass rushers in this entire class. And he just simply just put him in the dirt first rep against him. So I completely understand and concur with you on that as far as the offensive line goes.
Just it's a fun group to evaluate and to watch over the course of a week. So always got to show love to the offensive line. One of my favorite groups to watch on film. Thought they were going to be good coming in the week, and they even proved that even better leaving the week.
Absolutely, absolutely. To the quarterbacks, what quarterback do you feel separated themselves from the group most in Mobile, if any of them?
Yeah, I don't think any of them completely separated themselves. I think if you want to look from a perspective of players that helped themselves the most, I would probably say Spencer Rattler helped himself the most. In terms of like, all right, now you're behind a really solid offensive line. What can you do? And you saw it not only in the Senior Bowl game, but throughout the week when he has time to throw the football, when he can attack downfield. The arm talent has never been a question for him, or the athletic talent. To be frank, it's just about the down to down consistency. Early in the week, I would say, and just like every other quarterback, they had struggles with timing, struggles with seeing everything cleanly from the defense. But as the week went on, he got more and more impressive. He was more confident. His ability to drive the football down the field, throw the ball up in contest and catch situations. It felt like he felt or played freer than a Michael Penix Jr. or a Bo Nix, just because it felt like every throw they were making compared to Rattler, it felt like there was money on the line. So I felt like coming into the week, there was so much hype around Michael Penix and Bo Nix. Will one of those guys separate themselves? I don't think they did. I think they just showed exactly what you saw on their college film. Michael Penix can throw it all over the yard. He'll attack the boundaries. He'll attack all over the field, but not always the most accurate when doing so. Bo Nix is the opposite. He's accurate, but he will take the check down before taking too many shots downfield. He'll take what you give him. So I think those two guys showed exactly what you were expecting them to show when they got down to Mobile. But I think for Rattler, it was not only about showing what he can do talent wise, arm talent wise, but uh, the willingness to push the ball down the field, the willingness to use his legs, extend plays. You really saw all on full display So I would say he probably helped himself the most out of the quarterback group. But I feel like Michael Penix and Bo Nix, the opinions didn't change on them leaving Mobile, and it felt like they pretty much reminiscent of what they did on their college film.
Yeah, I agree with Spencer Rattler as well. I think some people forget that he was the number one ranked recruit in his class. He went to Oklahoma before the Caleb Williams situation and everything. He was starting as a redshirt freshman. So the talent has always been there. It's just over the years, as we've seen through his time at South Carolina, the maturity, the growing into, of the maturation of the man, and just being comfortable, in a new system and everything. Being being that in South Carolina, it really showed a different side of Spencer Rattler, because before we got to this point, it was always, oh, Spencer Rattler has attitude issues. He's for this himself. The thing with the Netflix special, the QB1 thing. So for him to have the week he had at the Senior Bowl, and also the year that he had at South Carolina this year, despite not having Juice Wells for the whole year, I'm basically having Xavier Leggett as his only reliable target. I think that Spencer Rattler put himself in position to possibly be a late day two pick. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I think that's right on line where I'm at with him. I think coming into the week, he probably were like, he probably goes early day three, maybe he sneaks in into late third round. And I think, I think the range is still there. I think maybe you could say early to mid third round instead of late third round this time around. But he certainly has helped himself. I feel like he's going to interview well throughout the process. Obviously, he's going to have to answer to things from years ago, which is unfortunate. Everything that you can hear coming out of South Carolina and just from people in general that know him is that he's a leader. He's a guy that goes out and he's going to lead. He's going to hold people accountable, hold himself accountable. He's a far cry from the guy they saw that was 17, 18 years old. Like everyone changes in that time frame. It's not the same guy that everyone still remembering. I think that's the unfortunate part of this process is that people still see these players for who they were 2 3 years ago. We have to like take that with a grain of salt. Like everyone changes over that course of time, and I think he's done a great job reshaping his image, and um, you know doing what he did at the Senior Bowl will only help him as he goes through this process.
Absolutely. That's something that as a scout I sometimes have to remember. Hey, these guys are people, right? These guys are people just like me and you. They have their learning curves, they have their faults, they have their ways that they fall short. But at the end of the day, you know they have the ability to grow, they have the ability to change, and that's all that really matters when it comes to the character concerns and whatnot.
Absolutely.
But yeah. But moving on, what player did you like leave Mobile saying, man, cannot wait to see more tape on this guy, and possibly how he tests the combine? Like, what player left had you leaving Mobile just so excited to get back home and watch more and study more on?
I would say probably Jarvis Brownlee from Louisville was at the top of my list. He's a guy I felt like I wrote about him, kind of in the Senior Bowl review of the week. How does a guy that started at a Power Five school for 2 consecutive years, was on a team that was in the ACC championship game? How does he kind of fly under the radar? Because like everyone was kind of looking at Quinyon Mitchell, Kalen King, some of the big names at corner, but his name didn't really come up much, um, which kind of is exactly what the Senior Bowl is designed to do is to even not just small school guys, but the guys that are kind of overlooked at the Power Five schools. And I felt like he was one of them. You saw what he was able to do in practice, be really aggressive, anticipating routes, getting underneath routes, making plays on the football, made an interception in the Senior Bowl game, and it translates to tape. and he was a guy that I was like, all right, I need to watch him immediately as soon as I get home. I watch him, and I came away just as impressed as I was at the Senior Bowl. So he was a guy that was at the top of my list. I'll go back to the offensive line. I'll go Christian Jones from Texas as another guy I wanted to go back and check the tape on. Because for my initial watch, and I watched about 2 or 3 games of him before coming down, I didn't really super impress. He gave up some pressures in that game against Washington in the college football playoff. So I was like, okay, maybe he's a guy that's probably going to go day three. Well, he came out in practice extremely well. And he really held his own against some really talented pass rushers. Darius Robinson, Chris Braswell were two edge rushers in that particular group that were hyped up. Well, he came through and he looked really, really impressive. So he was another guy I'm checking the tape on. Now, as far as for testing, there are two edge rushers that I'm looking forward to seeing from the Senior Bowl how they test. One of them being Adisa Isaac from Penn State. He's a long, quick, athletic player, and he had some flashes during the Senior Bowl week. But I felt like he still was a little light in his frame. So I almost wonder if he's going to bulk up a little bit, maybe add some more weight. But Penn State has a history of freak athletes and them testing off the charts, and I'm expecting him to do the same. So he's a guy that I'll be looking at closely. Then Austin Booker from Kansas. He was another guy that I saw some limited tape of him coming into the week. He only has 600 less than 600 career snaps in college. So he's a really
Wow.
inexperienced player, probably as inexperienced as like Gregory Rousseau coming out a few years ago. That's I wouldn't comp him as terms of play style, but like in terms of journey, a guy that uh, essentially was a rotational player at Kansas. Didn't really start many games, but really came on strong late in the season. And just like he came on strong late in the season, it was the same with Senior Bowl week. Last couple of days, he really put together some really nice days, especially on day two of practice. And I want to see if his, athleticism translates to his testing. I think he's a guy that for the most part, I mean, you can see the bend, the speed, the power, what he's able to do with his first step. But will he test that well, in a combine setting? And I think if he does, that could certainly even raise his stock even more. And show what he can do. So it'll be interesting to see those two guys. I feel like they both had like up and down weeks, but their ups were uh, a lot more exciting than their downs were. And some of that is some of the reps, some of the styles of offensive linemen they went up against that just didn't lend them to really exploding off the football. So I would say those guys. And then one last guy I just want to take a deeper look at overall is Gabe Hall from Baylor. He was a guy that really popped on day one, kind of faded over the course of the week, but he is kind of a tweener. He's not a true defensive lineman. He's really not a true edge rusher. So, what is he going to play? He has the size to play either one, but he's not really the most explosive guy. He's pretty good with his hands, but the tape says he's going to be a late day three player. But the Senior Bowl tape says something different. So I'm excited to see what he does over the next couple of weeks and what he does at his pro day to kind of push himself forward and his draft stock forward.
Yeah, I think Hall had, one of the most impressive day ones out of all the defensive players. I think that one move that he kept doing over every interior lineman and just kept getting it every time. I just found that hilarious. So definitely Gabe Hall. Booker, like you said, like when he like had time to really set up his rush, he was giving those tackles real problems. Like especially when he was longer than them, his ability to really bend and extend on some of those rushes were just very impressive, especially for someone like you said with limited snaps. Because when you don't play a lot in college, a lot of it could be oh, you're buried behind 5-star, 4-star recruits, but it also could be you're not getting that work in on the side after practice, before practice. So to see that type of bend, that type of ability as a rusher, with the limited snaps in college, just makes you think, wow, like really, really high ceiling guys. So definitely understand those players as well as the Louisville receiver that you mentioned.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it was interesting. You could go a lot of different ways, but it just shows you how deep this class was, and this Senior Bowl class specifically. But obviously, live. There's still a lot to be determined, and this was just one piece of the puzzle. So you have the tape part, you have the Senior Bowl part. Now you need the testing part to kind of really get a full profile of who these guys are. And obviously at the combine, you get a chance to talk to some of these guys too, to ask them about these various questions you may have, or things that you notice on their film. So it was always a good time to put that all together. And like I said, this is just one piece of the puzzle that goes into the NFL draft.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Um, who impressed you the most during practices? You can give, just one offensive player, one defensive player. Who was the most impressive player on the offensive side of the ball and the defensive side of the ball through the Senior Bowl practices?
Yeah, the offensive side is difficult because there's so many. But I'll go with Jamari Thrash, the Louisville receiver. I think to go on this setting, there's a lot of hype around guys like Roman Wilson. There's a lot of hype around some other receivers, Devontae Walker, and the talent that they have, Lad McConkey. And to me, I thought Roman Wilson and Lad McConkey, while they had really, really good weeks, and people are calling them big winners, I felt like they were already thought of as day two picks, and maybe one of them sneaks in the first round. So I won't say they are like were the most impressive, but I would say Jamari Thrash because of his size. He's not a super big guy, but he plays much bigger than his size suggests. We knew his ability to separate, but he's over there making contested catches and really doing a great job attacking the football in the air. And I felt like he didn't drop a ball one time all week. And that was not not a common theme across the board for receivers. It was a early struggle in the week for wide receivers catching the football, and he was always a guy that pulled it in. Really had no questions about it. He had a nice touchdown on day three of practice where Smith Rowley threw him a back shoulder pass, went up and snatched it out of the air. So I thought Thrash is probably the most impressive offensive player of the week. Defensive player, I have to go with Darius Robinson, Missouri, defensive lineman and edge. I just thought from the first snap of the week, he set the tone. He's a guy that some teams are going to value him at 3 tech, some are going to value him at 5 tech. I think he's probably a base end at the NFL level, but his ability to win both inside and outside against guards and tackles. I know he's another guy that loves the swim move, but he has some powerful hands, can win both on the inside and outside track. And he's also a really good run defender as well. He's not just an all pass rush guy. And I think in this type of setting, obviously you get a limited amount of snaps to make that type of impact as a run defender. There was a number of times where he blew up plays in the backfield on rundown. So Darius Robinson was a guy I thought could be a top 50 pick coming into the week. I think he's definitely going to be in that range. Probably early to mid second rounder, if I would guess right now, because I don't think he's gonna blow us away with his combine testing. Just because I wouldn't say he's the most fluid athlete, but he's the athleticism is apparent. His ability to win with his hands too. Coupled with that, I think you're looking at a guy that is going to be a big contributor early on as a rookie, and really round out a really nice career with his versatility.
Two really really under the radar prospects. So I'm kind of a little bit shocked that you brought up Thrash because out of all the receivers in the week, I low key thought he was the most consistent. Like a lot of players had high highs, and some players just had some really bad lows. Devontae Walker with his drops. You know Johnny Wilson with not being able to get off the lawn at times. But Thrash, out of all the receivers all week, pretty much was the most consistent. And Robinson, I mean, when you can rush like that, it it's a nightmare to try to diminish that value because it's a passing league now.
Mm,
So everything is catered to and defined by how can we get to the quarterback? How can we stop the quarterback? So you can never have, enough pass rushers. So absolutely getting a guy like him day two would be a great pick for any franchise, really.
absolutely. He just feels like a guy that the Baltimore Ravens would take. He just feels like that type of player where they love his versatility, they love what he does, and you can stick him anywhere on that already talented defensive line, and he'll make some plays for you. So he's a prospect to team fit that I really like early on, just with his skill set, his size, and what he can do at multiple positions. So I would not be surprised if we go through the process and the Ravens were one of the teams really interested in his services.
Yeah, and they're gonna need some more pass rush help due to they don't know what they're gonna do with Clowney. They also kind of 1 year deal with Van Noy, so it makes a ton of sense to continue to add to their pass rush as far as investing in a youthful player. So makes a ton of sense. Last question. What non Senior Bowl participating prospects are you just over head over heels over excited for to see at the NFL Combine? Because I know that they invited juniors this year, but there's a lot of prospects who are true juniors, even some redshirt sophomores who should really tear the combine up. So, which players are you most interested in seeing at the combine and why?
I think the most important one would be Keon White from Florida State, and I say that because we've seen how the wide receiver class is kind of unfolded. Like obviously, it's some form of Marvin Harrison, Roma Dunze, and Malik Neighbors at the top. All right, what happens after that? There's been some talk of Brian Thomas Jr., A.D. Mitchell, Xavier Worthy, Brian Thomas Jr. from LSU. But Keon Coleman's name really hasn't been discussed as much. A lot of people are kind of cooling on him after him being a hot name, especially the first half of the college football season. And I think it's because there's some concerns of him separating at the top of routes. His route running tree isn't as expansive as some of these other guys. So I think when you look at kind of every position by position, obviously the defensive back still needs to shake out and see who's going to emerge as the top guy, even though Tyrion Arnold seems to be that guy. I look at the receiver position, and uh, there's going to be a bit of a hole in between after those first three guys. All three of those guys could go inside the top 10. And then when does that next receiver come off the board? It really depends on what teams value in receivers, what they like. And I think Keon Coleman has a chance to either confirm that he's just a freak athlete that you can mold into what you want him to be, or he's just a guy that, you know, sometimes he's a 50-50 guy. Sometimes he could run away from the defense, kind of an inconsistency with speed and athleticism. And maybe we're giving his athleticism too much credit. So I think he is going to be the most interesting storyline, especially at the receiver position. Obviously, people want to see what Marvin Harrison, what Roma Dunze, and Malik Neighbors all run. But I think no player has more to gain than Keon Coleman entering the combine week, especially as a guy that was thought of as a first round player, maybe even a top 10 pick through early in the process, but has now either gone late first round or somewhere in the second round. So I think is extremely important from him. And then I'll go offensive line. I'll go Troy Fatanu from Washington. There's been a lot of talk, and he was supposed to be at Senior Bowl week, but decided not to do it. But there's been a lot of talk. Is he a guard? Is he a tackle? And I really think the short shuttle, the some of his athletic testing is going to tell us whether or not he's going to stick out on the perimeter. Full time, or is he going to move into the interior? And you look at him; he has 34-inch arms verified, so he meets the minimum threshold to be an NFL offensive tackle for most teams. But do they value him there? Does he have movement that lends more towards the guard? I think there's a lot of discussion around. He's another guy that's a potential first round pick. whether it's at guard or tackle. Some people had him as a first interior offensive lineman coming into Senior Bowl week. I think Jackson Powers Johnson probably shifted some boards, but he fits somewhere in between like the second or between like 2 and 4 in terms of rankings for interior offensive lineman if you put him there. But where does he match up at tackle? Is a difficult question to say. The tackle class is so good. Obviously with Fashanu, Alt. We talked about Fuaga. Amarius Mims from Georgia is another name. Tyler Guyton is a guy that we talked about as well. And that's just 5 names. There's so many other names that could be in that discussion. So Fontenot and Jordan Morgan are 2 guys that some people have them as guards, some as tackle. But I think Fatanu is probably the most high profile, somewhere in between guard and tackle. So I want to see if he answers some questions about that ability to play and stick out at tackle. Because obviously you want him to, and for me personally, I want him to fail at tackle before they move him to guard. But some teams might view him as guard only. So those would be the 2 guys that come to mind. Like they got to test well, they got to show the athleticism. Otherwise you're having different discussions about them, and maybe they're falling off the board in the first round and somewhere in the second or third round, which would be very interesting to see kind of how much it changes for people depending on how they go out and test, even how they interview as well. I think will be interesting to watch.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more on Keon Coleman. Did a film session on Keon Coleman early December. The main thing that I came away with from the tape was 50-50 ball. You love it. Love the ability to get downfield, right? As a vertical threat. The questions were, some routes when you know you're getting the ball, you know the primary read, you can tell you're engaged, you can tell you're trying to separate, you can tell you're trying to actively get open for the quarterback. As soon as they have Johnny Wilson as the primary read, you look disengaged. Your routes go from looking pretty solid to what is that? See what I'm saying? So a good week of testing for Keon Coleman would do wonders for his draft stock. For me personally, I'm not as low as like saying like he's like third round or anything like that. I still have him, mid to early second. But I do think that a good combine reaffirming that athleticism that he showed in his ability to play basketball at Michigan State and play football, and also was recruited as a basketball player in high school as well. Reaffirming that athleticism would do a lot for me to push him, back into that first round conversation. As far as another prospect that I would be interested in seeing the combine, I will go back to the defensive backfield, and it's Kool-Aid McKinstry. When you talk about what you want in a cornerback, if you can mold a cornerback, like Kool-Aid McKinstry is it. The problem is we need to see him in the athletic testing portion. We need to see, how fluid, is his movement skills. Are his hips, just naturally tight, or does he have, that openness that you need at the cornerback position? So Kool-Aid McKinstry, like that 40 and those, defensive back drills will be everything for him, because that's the difference between him being the fourth cornerback taken and potentially the first, battling with his teammate Terrion Arnold and Nate Wiggins, a cornerback from Clemson. So, yeah, Kool-Aid McKinstry definitely very, very interested in seeing how his combine goes.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen like what Quinyon Mitchell's been able to do up close at the Senior Bowl. So I say somewhere in between, probably like, the second and maybe fourth or fifth cornerback taken. And we know he's gonna run really fast. He seems fluid. So I feel like he's answered some questions that maybe we have about some other players. And it's going to be interesting. Like I said, it's always interesting to see these guys not only go through these drills, but simultaneously. Like you won't see, you won't see it like back to back, like with like Arnold. Like Arnold and McKinstry might be in different groups, but they might be the top of each of their groups. You'll be able to see like how these guys move in succession. And I think that's always another big part of the combine, not just the testing part, but the on field workouts, because that's when you start to see, all right, this is what he can do in the open field. This is what he can do when he actually is doing football stuff, or football translatable things. And I think that's when you start to really separate. Okay, maybe this guy isn't as fluid as I thought on film, or maybe it just looks better on film than it actually is. When you get to see it in that kind of high stakes environment, you start to really see like who is actually a real good athlete, or and who's a real elite athlete. And I think though there's tiers to that, and you'll be able to see it like up close and like I said, simultaneously. You'll see guys who you have maybe ranked higher, maybe they look even better than you thought they did. So it's always an interesting part of the puzzle, and watching it live and seeing it unfold. That's kind of the value for it, and being able to see how you match up against some of your contemporaries.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, that's gonna wrap it up for our Senior Bowl review. Before we go, Devin, do you have anything you would like to plug? Anything coming up, with you being at the Inquirer that you would like to, let the people know that you have going on? Anything that you want to say before we close this bad boy up?
Yeah, I appreciate you having me on. I'll be dropping a mock draft on Monday, right after the Super Bowl. So that'll be kind of the next big piece of content that I have working on. Going to be working on a combine preview, and probably be in the next couple weeks that gets released, and more so looking more at the since we're covering the Eagles, it'll be more Eagles focused, but just some general storylines to watch. Like Keon Coleman will definitely be at the top of that, because I think how he does will kind of set the precedent of like not only where he goes, but how early do we get that next receiver to come off the board too. Because I feel like if depending on how he tests and how he goes, he could either really help the receiver class or force another maybe one or two receivers that probably shouldn't be first round picks up into the first round, because they just want a guy of that caliber, or you're waiting for a receiver, or you waiting for that guy to fall to you. So I think it'll be interesting to watch. But yeah, I'll have a mock draft on Monday, and then I'll have a combine preview in the coming weeks.
Sounds good. Sounds good. You guys make sure y'all check that out. Plug your Twitter quickly so everyone can know where to find you.
Yeah, so it's at real_D_Jackson on Twitter. You can find me there, posting about prospects, talking about the NFL draft. Um, Happy to interact with anyone, and just let me know.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. That's going to close out our 2024 Reese Senior Bowl review. We thank you for your time, and we hope that you have a blessed day.